This is Morgan Hazelwood, back again with more writing tips and writerly musings. Today I'm here to share with you what to do when your manuscript is the wrong length. If you've ever tried to write a manuscript, you've probably been at one end of the scale or the other at some point. It's hard to get a manuscript or even a short story to end up at the target word count on the first try. I know I've talked about this before, but a refresher never hurts, especially when one gets back to that stage. While I'm not cutting my manuscript right now, when a friend asked me for help, I called in all my expertise and all my notes. My first manuscript ended up at over 120,000 words, and I cut it down to 80,000, and it worked its way back up to 95,000, and I think it's sitting just under 90K right now. For my current work in progress, I realized my word count wasn't going to be as high as I wanted it to be, and there was a lot more story I wanted to tell. So let's dig in. How do you get your word count from where it is to wherever you're trying to get it? Well, if you need 20,000 words or more, you are going to need to add a major component to your story. The easiest way is what I'm doing in my current story, which is to add another point of view character. But you can also do a side quest or another goal, maybe a love interest, especially if you take the side quest and you filter it into the story in multiple places. It can really integrate and flesh out your story so it's less person goes from here to there and shoves everything out of the way in pursuit of plot. So just try not to, when you add this side plot, just splice it in between chapter 11 and chapter 12 and have them go off on some quest and never mention it again when they get back to the main storyline. So that's if you need a lot of words. If you need less than 20,000 words, this is where you're going to want to do a little more finesse. You're probably going to want to flesh out your scenes, maybe add one or two, add more internal monologue, more description, whatever you are typically more weak in or less likely to put into the initial draft. Perhaps a few character building scenes, especially between the main and the secondary characters, that make your readers care more. On the flip side, let's talk about if you need to cut less than 20,000 words. If it's just a couple thousand or, less than 10% of your work in progress, you can probably get away with just cleaning up paragraphs, trimming sentences, and streamlining action. If you're still stuck, you might want to start off looking at each of your scenes, not your chapters, your scenes. Many writers find that they start scenes too early and they make them go on longer than they need to be. Look at your scene and see what it's doing for the plot and the character's emotional arc, and trim it to size. When you look at your chapters and your scenes, you can usually look at both ends and trim some off either end. Getting into the bigger bits, if you need to trim over 20,000 words, or 10 to 25% of your story or your work in progress, unless you are focused on one aspect of the story to the detriment of, the story itself, be it descriptions, stage direction, info dumps, or what have you, you're gonna have to work a bit harder. Now, there's some of us who love the beautiful descriptions that go on for pages, but sometimes you can make it 2 sentences and move on. If you don't have that problem, you are gonna have to be looking at combining background characters or even secondary characters, dropping subplots, and possibly, if you have them, getting rid of a point of view character. Now, if you need to cut over 50,000 words? Well, first off, this usually happens when you have excessive world building or you're following too many characters. Sometimes the plot is just too much for one book and should be for a series. Typically, if you have to cut over 50,000 words, just split the story. Find an emotional arc and a partial goal and split the story there, or see where you can create one. As always, you do want the story to stand alone, so try to adjust the story so that you're working towards an interim goal rather than the big story arc. And that's it. That's how to get your manuscript larger or smaller as depending on what scale you're working on. Have you ever had to massively adjust word count on a project? How did you do it? And that's all for today. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button and share it with all your friends. It goes a long way towards helping people find me. And I'll be back again next Monday with more writing tips and writerly musings. Bye-bye.